Great Demon King, Chapter 51. The Calm Aftermath, After Killing Someone. This wasn't the first time that Han Shuo had killed someone, but compared to slaughtering forest trolls, the impact on Han Shuo's heart from killing Claude was exceedingly great. After all, forest trolls were a different race from him, renowned robbers whose deaths felt as natural as killing magical creatures. However, Claude was completely different. Han Shuo had been forced to kill him because he knew deep within his heart that if Claude didn't die, Han Shuo could never put thoughts of peacefully living his life into his mind. Watching Claude weaken and sag into a pool of blood, Han Shuo felt a bit numb in that moment. An empty feeling settled in his heart. He hadn't hesitated when he made his move. But it was only when he watched Claude die in front of him that a sense of nervousness began to grow within him. Claude was a noble and the youngest son of the commander of the Empire's Griffin Legion, Commander Baba Shay. If news of this matter leaked, only death awaited Han Shuo. Gazing at Claude's corpse, Han Shuo stared dumbly into space for a while. His originally slightly panicked expression became more and more resolute, and his demeanor turned harshly cold. Finally, Han Shuo rearranged his clothes and stood up, walking up to Claude with a calm face as he rummaged through his belongings. He poured out a few gold coins from his money bag, a crystal card, and some scattered medicines. After contemplating for a bit, Han Shuo only put away the gold coins. He set aside the potentially incriminating crystal card and Claude's other belongings, ensuring that there were no obvious traces linking him to the murder. A little skeleton, wielding a bone knife, appeared in front of Han Shuo after his incantation had finished. Han Shuo directed the skeleton to search out a desolate clearing where one man and one skeleton, wielding bone knives and daggers, spent a few minutes digging a deep hole. After burying Claude in the hole, Han Shuo carefully cleaned up the traces of blood that Claude had left behind. He even slowly covered up the spots where Claude had fallen and rolled around, meticulously ensuring that no evidence was left behind. Circling around the forest patch and confirming that no clues had been left behind, Han Shuo did not return along the original path. Instead, he made an additional circuit and dug a deep hole to the north of Drol, burying all of Claude's belongings. Finally, he returned to Drol using a different street, avoiding the route he had taken earlier. He did all this because he was careful and cautious. They hadn't garnered anyone's attention on the way to the forest with Claude earlier because Claude had intentionally done so. Now that Han Shuo had killed him and carefully buried his body, logically speaking, no one should discover it. Even if someone unintentionally stumbled upon Claude's body, Han Shuo had taken all the belongings off the body, creating the impression of murder in the course of robbery. These things happened quite often in the town of Drol, and should be able to conceal the original reason for death. After Han Shuo had dealt with these loose ends, he concealed himself in the surroundings of the hotel where Irene and the others stayed for the next 2 days, silently observing the movements of the light major students. He discovered that whether it was Irene or Beacher, none of them came looking for Claude. It looked like they thought that Claude had wronged them first, and so left him alone. Claude was certainly the one who understood his bodily condition the most. No matter how he tried to explain under those circumstances, it was more than likely that not many would believe his words. Judging from the timing in which Claude had come for him and his understanding of the psychedelic aphrodisiac, he more or less surmised that Claude had come looking for revenge as soon as he'd sobered up and hadn't had time to explain anything to Irene or Beacher. After 2 days of observation, Han Shuo finally relaxed and let down his guard upon seeing that Irene and Beacher made no moves to look for Claude, and only focused their attentions on spending money as they visited various weapons and armor vendors, as well as pharmacists. At dusk on this night, Han Shuo did not venture out again to keep an eye on Irene and Beacher. Instead, he stayed inside to quietly practice magic. He repeatedly expanded the width of his body's meridians and improved their pliability, pushing his magical yuan to its limits. Han Shuo was seated primly on the edge of his bed, completely naked, sweat pouring down his entire body, starting from his forehead. The tendons of his body bulged like endless numbers of worms moving beneath the surface of his skin. It looked even more cringeworthy and scary than the most evil tattoo, a testament to the extreme measures he was taking to enhance his magical abilities. During this entire process, a sudden tremor ran through Han Shuo's mind as he sank into a senseless realm. For the moment, he forgot himself, forgot time, and was like a sculpture, without life. Only a faint hint of black splendor circulated beneath his skin, a dark manifestation of his inner turmoil and growing power. Don. A sudden round of fierce knocking abruptly awakened Han Shuo. When Han Shuo came back to himself, he took stock of himself internally and understood that he must have unknowingly sunk into the demonic mental state just now. Don don. The knocking was still continuing, and Han Shuo was a bit irritated that his training had been interrupted. He grabbed a random towel and wrapped it around himself, saying with irritation, "Coming, coming." When the door was opened, Han Shuo received the shock of his life. The irritable expression on his face vanished without a trace as it immediately transformed into a smiling face. He said merrily, "Hey, it's you guys. I've been waiting a long time for you. You've finally come back." Standing outside the door, Fanny and Lisa looked a bit worn out, their hair a bit messed up. They carried items in their hands and packs on their backs, looking quite tired from the road. It appeared that they just returned from the dark forest. "You, Brian, you actually made it back to Drol such a long time ago. We were worried about you for quite a while." "Oh, how'd you get money to live in such an expensive room?" "If it wasn't for the owner's certainty, I truly wouldn't have believed that you were the one living in this room." Fanny's clear eyes swept over Han Shuo, and she spoke with a bit of a bite in her words. "Brian, what happened the day you left? You didn't return for 2 days, and I thought something happened to you," Lisa asked, her voice tinged with concern. "I got lost after I left, and when I found the original camp, I discovered that you'd long since left. I couldn't find you guys, so I went one step ahead and returned to the town of Drol to wait for you. Good thing that everyone is fine." "That's wonderful." Han Shuo smiled slightly and faintly explained himself, his tone calm and collected. Fanny didn't immediately speak after Han Shuo had finished, but rather gazed upon him with apparent thought. She exhaled lightly after a while. "Brian, you're truly completely different from before," he started, and managed to squeeze out an honest smile. He scratched his head. "Really? Where am I different?" "In many ways. Your appearance, body, and height, as well as your personality and expressions when you talk, are all much too different from how I knew you before. It looks like you were the one who changed the most after experiencing the trials of the Dark Forest. All the students have undergone some changes after constantly facing battles of life and death. But who would thought that your change would have been the biggest? How shocking." Fanny stared dumbly at Han Shuo and said with a face of severity. Han Shuo understood that during this outing in the Dark Forest, unbeknownst to him, a significant change had truly occurred in the way he viewed things. This change had accompanied the increases in his strength and the dangers that he had faced. After killing Claude with his own hands the day before yesterday and a serious round of reflection, Han Shuo had gained a clearer understanding of the harsh realities of this world, and with it, his heart had become colder and crueler. "Master Fanny, you left a note saying that you guys had met the 2 man-eating monsters. Did you get into a conflict with them in the end?" Han Shuo laughed lightly and didn't explain things in further detail. Instead, he started asking Fanny what had happened to them afterward. "Of course, the 2 man-eating monsters kept following us. They even colluded with a few forest trolls to attack us. We finally made it out, but our paths were deviated significantly from our original direction, because we were avoiding the man-eating monsters and the forest trolls. That's why we returned to Drol so late," Fanny responded. Nodding, Han Shuo was about to open his mouth when he suddenly frowned and abruptly stood up. He said with a face full of seriousness, "Looks like we've got trouble. Everyone on alert. The orc wolf riders have appeared in the southern part of Drol. They are headed this way. Everyone make ready for battle." Large yells suddenly sounded from the streets outside the hotel, all concerning the imminent invasion from the orc wolf riders. Han Shuo's heart raced as he sensed the urgency in the air. The peaceful aftermath of his revenge had been momentary, and now the town of Drol was facing a new threat. He glanced at Fanny and Lisa, their expressions hardening with determination as they prepared for the impending conflict. "Stay close and follow my lead," Han Shuo instructed calmly, his mind already formulating strategies to counter the orc wolf riders. The lessons learned from his recent experiences had sharpened his instincts, and he was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As the group prepared to defend their town, Han Shuo felt a renewed sense of purpose. The allure of gold coins and the promise of power had driven him to this point, but now, he understood that true strength came from facing adversity head-on. With each passing day, Han Shuo was evolving into a formidable force, his past actions shaping him into someone who could no longer afford to live peacefully without asserting his dominance. The night was far from over, and the battle for Drol was about to begin. Han Shuo stood ready, his resolve unshaken, as the sounds of approaching danger echoed through the streets. The calm aftermath had given way to the harsh reality of survival, and Han Shuo was prepared to embrace it fully.